I think that your question, I personally, yes, a common market would be great. Wouldn't it be great to have 500 million people all in the same market buying and selling goods? And to do that, you do need some certain regulations over defining what the goods are, laws over certain sorts of services, and some sort of tax harmonisation potentially is involved and all of that. But the common market, I think, is what most people broadly support. The problem is that our continental friends always had a slightly different approach to what Europe was about. We were never invaded and we didn't lose the war. I say that because that actually defines the difference of attitude towards what it is about. Not because I want to live in the past, it's just the attitude of the average Briton is that Europe was something about trade. But if you speak to German, I was at a meeting this morning with the President of the German Bundestag, and you speak to people like this, Europe is not about just trade. It is about the European project, the European ideal. It is actually at its core about preventing further conflict. And so their psychology is different and it drives a different approach, which I respect, but it's not one that I generally feel is the majority view in Britain. I think actually what's going to happen is that the money is going to run out in Europe. The Eurozone is not going to stay in the same form. I think it's all going to be quiet at the moment, but it will come back. At that point, Europe is going to have to make a decision on whether it further integrates. And I think at that point, Britain is either going to be able to negotiate a different relationship, or we're going to leave. And I actually think that would be such a pity that they've actually broken up a common market in order to try, because of their own different view of what Europe should be about. And I'm not a better off out person at the moment, but I'm looking at the trends of attitude. And the British attitude is tackling this way, and the European attitude is tackling that way. And so I think, but ultimately, Conservative government in 2015, you have a referendum. So there's an opportunity in 2017, 2018, in order to exercise your vote. At the moment, if the Labour government comes in 2015, you don't. But I'd watch that space, because I suspect that they may move on their position on referendums because they will see that it is politically advantageous.
Thank you.
Who was that? It was I think a judge at the back.
You're answering with superb candor, but I just wonder to what extent you're really able to be influential. We've got a whip system.
Yeah.
The selection of ministers is totally in control
Yes.
of the Prime Minister, so if you say something that's slightly out of line, you're not right to be selected. How effective are you really able to be, or is it any member of Parliament really able to be in genuinely representing the views of the electorate? And to create a strategic plan, and to say it's not good enough to spend £33 billion on a railway,
Yes.
etc. I just wonder, it seems to me that power is held by really very small sort of people.
Yes, you're right. I think the whipping operation is going to prove extremely, particularly difficult challenge for me with regards to the HS2 vote, which I think comes at the end of this year. Because, as you rightly say, you have to stay within, and you have to be part of the system in order to have some there's patronage and there's a sense of loyalty to the cause, which I don't have a problem with. I mean, I'm standing here as a Conservative member of Parliament. I'm not the member of Parliament for the Phillip Lee party. We have a party political system, and I'm quite happy to accept that. It's only occasionally. I mean, I've only ever rebelled. Well, I technically rebelled on Tuesday because I abstained on the program motion. But that's a technicality, really. I've only ever rebelled on laws reform because I thought it was the wrong thing for my country, to be honest with you. I sort of stood my ground on that. I've actually voted sometimes where it's been, okay, I'll go with this. I think I'll give the benefit of that. And that is the nature of politics. There is compromise in it. With regards to the patronage and progress through ministerial ranks, I actually think that at the moment I'm not that bothered. And the reason I'm not bothered about progress in that direction is because I think politics is changing. I think the country actually is seeking more conviction politics, and the political class are lagging behind. And particularly my party that still seems to be wedded to that Blairite, spin, triangulation. It seems, the thick of it, it's all a bit out of date. And actually the country is thinking, well, hang on a minute, if all of these challenges are so stark, which they are, we need a plan. And we need somebody who has the vision that you referred to. People want to feel inspired. They want to say, okay, I'll take the medicine because I know where I'm going. The problem at the moment is that we have a political system, culture, that is worried about where we're going next week. And it's beginning to show signs of cracking up, really, and we're seeing this U-turn culture and everything else. I'm not necessarily blaming the protagonists. I think it is a culture that's grown up in a sort of 24-hour news media age, in the internet. And I think sometimes, I get random little bits of abuse on Twitter, and you can sometimes, it's a bit wary. When you actually step back from it, you get the perspective of 20,000 people voted for somebody else at the last election in this constituency. I don't get 20,000 tweets a day that are abusive. I get one or two from the same people every day. But I admit it can be wary, because if you've had a long day in the office and you get somebody in, the problem is that that's magnified. You're the Prime Minister. It's a tough job because you're dealing with a whole multitude of challenges and you're trying to stay popular because that's the nature of democracy. You've got to remain supportive, but you're also trying to do something. I think where the problem lies is that I'm not so sure that the system allows enough deep thinking and planning in order to come forward and bring forward a plan for the next 10 years. I certainly don't see much evidence of that at the moment. And I think that's actually where the system is lacking. I think that's where the political scene is lacking. And I'm certainly trying, in my own little way, to bring about something that could develop such a grander plan, a sort of more strategic vision of the future that is viable and sustainable. I'm not too bothered about the sort of ministerial stuff, because I didn't go into politics to be someone. I sort of went into politics to do something. I know if I do something, I end up being someone. But it's that way around for me.
But if you eliminated whips, for example?
Yeah, but you would end up with complete inertia. Because nothing would ever get passed. You'd be constantly trying to negotiate with people. And you try negotiating with 300 of my colleagues, just on a daily basis. It's incredibly difficult to get them all to agree on something. You do need a party system with some discipline. And I think that's the only way you're ever going to get something through. Where I think discipline has been breaking down is, an example this week on Tuesday, is that they brought something forward that was not in the manifesto. Yeah. So, consequently, a number of colleagues were saying, well, hang on a minute, I've signed up to the Conservative Party ticket, the Conservative Party manifesto, you're now bringing forward stuff that's actually not in the manifesto. And I think, it just happened to be that issue this week, it could have been trains or planes or whatever it is. I think if you're going to expect people to be whipped, i.e., look, come on, you stood on this ticket, you stood on this platform, then you've got to keep to your platform. And you've got to not, tack away from it. And if you are going to tack away from it, you've got to engage them, talk to them, and explain why you were doing it. If you don't, you end up with the situation that you had on Tuesday, where more than half of my party was in one lobby going against where the Prime Minister was. And I don't think that helped anybody, really. It certainly didn't help politics, because there was this perception of your discipline, and I don't think that's good. I like the party system, so the whipping, I can deal with the whipping. It's just... you can take it. Would you like to be I don't know why you're blushing. I can deal with the discipline required. That's the nature of party politics. And I don't think that's necessarily a problem. There was gentlemen like that,
Because it's just directly related to what you've just been saying.
Oh, I can't answer.
At the risk of being a bit repetitive, I would like to go back to the European question and particularly pick you up on a couple of comments in your reply. One is, I think you said that there was a groundswell support for the European common market. I question that. I think if you had a snap referendum now, it would be a no, I suggest. The other one is you perpetuate this feeling that the European common market is all about trade. I'm not sure that, I'm not convinced by that. There was, and I think it still exists, EFTA, which sorted out the trade across Europe. Norway and Switzerland seem to do quite well without being in the common market. They also control their borders. So I think it's more political than about trade.
Okay, I didn't say it was about trade, I said I wish it was about trade. It's the first thing. Secondly, I wouldn't want to be in Norway's situation because they get told what the rules are, they don't participate in drawing the rules up. And they also are very blessed with regards to energy resources, so they can really almost afford to be members of the way that they are. Only 5 million of them, and they have a couple of $1 trillion in sovereign wealth fund. So they're a totally different situation to us, really. And the same as Switzerland, who also have this arrangement, which is they don't really have control over the regulations. They have to sort of take them or leave them. I want it to be trade, so I don't think that it is trade. That's why I think there's a problem. That's actually my position. I also find it somewhat frustrating that Britain can't engage in free trade arrangements with Canada, Mexico, South Africa, because you have to do it through the European Union. There are some moves at the moment for a free trade, or at least some trade arrangements between the EU and the US at the moment, which I guess is progress. And there are some moves between the EU and Japan, which I guess is progress. But no, I don't subscribe to the view that the European Union is all about trade. Evidence of that is what's been going on. It's actually more than that. It is about European solidarity. It is that sense that if we don't hang together, we'll end up fighting each other. And I think that's, personally, I don't subscribe to that view anymore. I think the world has changed. I'm not saying that we've disinvented war or conflict. I'm realistic because of the finite resources of the earth that may rear its ugly head again in the future. But I don't see the type of I cannot envisage a situation with such an interrelated world that we have, a Germany attacking Britain. I don't see that, particularly in view of the fact that we now are their primary trading partner. And so are they really going to start being protectionist? I don't think so. And so it's, I don't want to, nothing's for certain, but I'm not convinced that we should just be going down the path that they seem to be doing, because of a fear of something that I think is extremely unlikely to happen. Indeed, it was only last year, I think, that there was a Nazi and a communist on Greek television, and the Nazi punched the communist. And I thought there was a certain irony in German austerity leading to a Nazi punching a communist. And I mean that seriously, actually. You can force countries so far that they end up becoming nationalistic and fighting within themselves. Prejudice starts rising, the Golden Dawn in Greece, being anti-Semitic, anti-Semitism is on the rise across Europe. And so I'm not ignoring the fact that's a possibility. I'm just saying that I fear that it isn't about common market anymore, and that's actually, I think there is a majority in this country who want to be a member of the common market. I'm not so sure there's a majority who want to be a member of the European Union. That was my problem. Andy's next.
We note that you abstained in the same-sex marriage bill.
To be pedantic, positive.
You positively voted both ways, yes, we understand.
Which is different to not
yes. And we understand your reasons for doing so. And the dissertation that you gave, in which you gave those reasons, was well thought out. But have you made it plain to the party managers that stunts like this, raising a bill like this, from the PM, only destroy the party at the grassroots? And how has this debate, how has this debacle improved our chances of winning the election in 2015? As a third party, if I may, and what progress has been made towards having a bonfire of the quangos as promised in the manifesto,
All right.
how many of these Grangos are still led by new Labour appetites?
Okay. First of all, this isn't a Conservative Party meeting.
No,
So I don't.
but we are all.
So I've just got cautious. I don't want it to be drawn into sort of internal Conservative Party discussion.
I say, but we are all affected by these things.
Yes, but you're broad. I'll address each point. The dissertation that he's referring to, I produced a statement online yesterday as to why I had positively abstained, which for people who don't stay at night watching the BBC Parliament channel, which is probably, I hope, all of you, it involves me actually walking through both lobbies. And the reason that one does that is because then it gets published that you have done it. It is recorded that you have abstained. If, as 35 of my colleagues, Conservative colleagues, just did not vote, their names are not publicly recorded. I would suggest to you that it was braver of me to be publicly recorded and abstain than not. So that is why I put out for that positive abstention. The reasons for it are online, and I would encourage you to read my statement. But you make the point about what frustrates you is that it didn't appear in manifestos and that sort of thing. And I share that view, which was a contributing factor towards not supporting, because I didn't think that a proper public engagement had taken place. And indeed, no engagement of any note had taken place with the Church of England. And I thought that that was unnecessary confrontation. I think when it comes to sort of social change issues like this, I think you need to take people with you as best you can. I found myself, though, and I'll be very honest with you, when you're in an atmosphere where you're essentially being told that the right thing to do, the fashionable thing to do, you're being warned that if you don't do this, you'll regret it in the future. Not walking through the ILB took a lot of courage, actually. And as you'll see in the statement, there was no sense of any homophobic element, or I'm not an active Christian, but I don't go to church every Sunday. I was pretty agnostic personally, but I didn't like the manner in which the legislation had been brought forward. And I was also very reflective of the fact that I'd had about 300 emails against and 14 emails for. And I am a representative of my constituency. And I didn't view it as an issue on abortion. I can tell you now, abortion is a personal conscience issue in my book. I will be voting on the basis of my personal conscience on that issue if it ever came back to the floor of the House. I didn't view this as a personal conscience issue in the same way. So I felt like I had to reflect views as best I could. As you can imagine, there were 77,000 of you. There were plenty of views on this issue. So that was the difficulty. With regards to party unity and everything else, I guess I can broaden this out to other parties because of the nature of this meeting. There were quite a few Labour members in the no lobby. It didn't get reported as much, but there were quite a few. And there were also some Liberal Democrat members in the no lobby as well. So all parties actually had a problem of people being in both sides. And I think yet again that was because of the way in which the legislation had been handled. Traditionally in Parliament, social change comes through a private member's bill. In 1967, as an example, a very young David Steele MP brought forward a private member's bill on bringing in the Abortion Act. Okay? It was brought in, it was sort of tested. You do a private member's bill, colleagues get to vote on it, and it's a free vote. And then depending on what the sort of feedback in the chamber is, and also the discussion in the wider country, the government of the day then supports that bill and incorporates it into government legislative timetable, which is what the Labour government of Harold Wilson did in 1967. Okay? That's how social change takes place in Westminster. Well, that's what I understood to be the way. For some reason, and I encourage you to direct this question at others, they chose not to go down that path, and I think that is why there was so much upset around Westminster this week. I'm pretty shattered because I and my staff are my witness. I spent many an hour turning over what I was going to do, trying desperately to try and think through on the philosophical front, and etc., etc. And it was very, very difficult. So I wasn't best pleased, which was another reason why I abstained, because I just was not pleased with the way and the manner in which, and I abstained actually on everything, and thereby incurred the wrath of my whip's office, because I abstained on the programme motion, because I was expected to vote for a programme motion, which in effect curtailed debate in the House of Commons. And that was 3-month whipped. And I wouldn't. So that's, and anyway, the last question,
Thank you.
okay, not enough is being done.
Bonfire of
Not enough is being done, that's the first thing. And pressure is applied continuously. Secondly, with regards to the people who run the Quangos and run the public bodies, your party political point about them all being New Labour is factually accurate. And I, speaking as a Conservative Member of Parliament, I find it somewhat surprising that we have come into government and have not realised that if we're going to get our legislative timetable, actually get it to work and implement our policies, that we've left so many people who have been placed by the opposition to provide opposition to those things being implemented, the policies that were voted for by the British people. Education is a classic area where that has happened.
And they're fighting us, aren't they?
And they're fighting. So I agree with you, Andy, there are problems around that. And I without wanting to be too controversial, the new head of the NHS Commissioning Board,
How could they?
who is also the head of the Strategic Health Authority for Mid Staffordshire Hospital,
Golly gosh.
okay, and a former member of the Communist Party, was appointed by this government to be chairman of the NHS Commissioning Board. And I'm mulling over